And this is a chart that I think says in another way what he so profoundly provided us today. This chart to me represents beautiful, educated, moneyed black people all over America. It could represent black organizations, it could represent black churches, it could represent black social and civic organizations. And what you will notice about these beautiful black people all over America is that everybody is doing their own thing, caught up in a Eurocentric value of rugged individualism, having forgotten that it takes a village to raise a child. There is no power here, brothers and sisters. There is no power here. Power is most effective concentrated. You can take a 55-gallon drum of water, spill it over, it will disperse, find its own level, and eventually evaporate. You can take that same 55-gallon drum of water, put it under pressure, put a lid on it, put a hose in it, put a nozzle on the end of that hose, and it can cut concrete. There is no power with us being disconnected. See, there's nothing wrong with dispersion. I live in Cleveland, you live in Atlanta. We have folk in the Caribbean, we have folk in Africa. That's dispersion. That's okay, but we do not have to be disconnected. We are a disconnected people. We are powerless in disconnection. This is where all the power is. You see? This is where all the power is. Whether you are at the center of your own network or part of someone else's network, this is where the power is. There's a beautiful African proverb that says, when spiders unite, they can tie up a lion. When we connect, because we are disconnected, we're disconnected from those of like mind. We're disconnected from the best practices in our community. I don't care what it is that you want to do, what profession you want to engage in, what business you want to get into. I can introduce you to brothers and sisters all over America that they are doing it to death. You just don't know who they are. You are disconnected from them. There is no power in disconnection. Okay? When we connect, we prevent interlopers from coming into our communities and taking and destroying at will.
All right, George.
Try to open up the Booker T. Washington delicatessen in Chinatown and see what happens. So we must connect. We must connect the dots. That must be the movement for our people in the 21st century. We need a lot of us doing a little instead of a few of us doing a lot. We need to get together to get ahead. That is why we must network.
Good afternoon. This is Bill Cobbs with On the Record. You know, the reason I wanted to start the show today with that particular video is to help you to understand that we are a disconnected people. Since 1865, we have been fighting to belong to something that does not want us. You know, we watched the passage of the 13th and the 14th and the 15th Amendments, and those were the things that were supposed to set us free, that were supposed to make us equal, that were supposed to make us a part of America. But yet, to this day, we are still coping. We're coping because we are not a part of this thing that we so long to be part of. We're coping because we don't know how to connect. We don't know how to join. We don't know how to become part of a cooperative. So today we're going to talk about why it is time to move beyond coping to actually doing and getting something done. You know, there's a book that I recently read. It's called The White Wall. And The White Wall is about how big finance bankrupts the Black community. Now, it's interesting. We allow the interlopers to come in and to bankrupt our community, but we're afraid to come together to create opportunities that will allow all of our people to prosper and to grow. You know, I want you to think about this for a second. I want you to really stop and think about the fact that since 1865, we have been in a coping circle. We have tried to figure out how we're going to be included in something that, for the most part, doesn't want us, doesn't see any value in us, doesn't want to open itself to our presence or influence. And coping can make you accept things that aren't good for you. And we've accepted them. You know, how many times since 1865 have we had civil rights legislation? And who among us is capable of saying that that civil rights legislation that has been written time and time and time again has benefited our community? It's not designed to benefit our community. It's designed to appease you and to make you think something is happening when it really isn't. So if we're going to be serious about moving forward, about prospering, about doing the things that will allow us to see the land of milk and honey, it's only going to happen if we do it ourselves. Because if we continue to wait for someone else to do it, for someone else to give us what they owe us, it will never happen. It will never happen. You know, I recently read a story about a California family who had a beachfront piece of property that was taken from them in the early 1900s. And that property was recently returned to them. And when it was returned, the new owners, who were descendants of the people who originally bought the property, decided that the best thing they could do was to sell that property. That's a coping mechanism. That's what you do when you don't know any better. That's what you do when you don't recognize the value of ownership. And there were many excuses given for why they sold, one being the fact that, you know, they couldn't afford the taxes. Well, you now have an asset that you didn't have before that you can make use of. So I don't buy the notion that you couldn't afford to keep it. What I do believe is that you fell into that white Eurocentric value system that says, I'm gonna get mine, I'm not gonna worry about anything else. And you took a few shekels for what was historically yours. And until we recognize that our strength will come from uniting and becoming a part of a bigger whole, we will never, ever, ever recognize the greatness of us as a people. Now, since I told you about The White Wall. Let me share a few things with you about what this book talks about. The White Wall really talks about how blacks and other people of color have traditionally been exploited by the financial communities that they do business with. When you go to the bank to get a loan, you pay a higher interest rate. When you go to the bank to borrow the money for a car, you pay a higher interest rate. You continue to do business with people whose only mission in life is to make life harder for you. That's because you only think in terms of coping. You don't think in terms of getting in a position where you make decisions. Now, uh, one of the things that I want you to think about is that black home ownership has not really changed significantly in the last 50 years. The same percentage of black folks who owned homes 50 years ago are the people who own homes today. We haven't increased that percentage while significantly, while other ethnic groups have. And it's because we don't recognize the value of owning our own. We don't recognize the value as a community of building a solid foundation. So books like The White Wall, we have to read and understand how the game is played so the game doesn't get played on us. We are so used to struggling that we accept struggling as a badge of courage. And what it really is, more than anything else, is a badge of ignorance. And we've got to pull ourselves out of that ignorance and become the masters of our own fate. Uh, I talked to you a little bit last week about the importance of putting together community cooperatives. Community cooperatives aren't designed to make sure that, a handful of people get rich. What they're designed for is to make sure that the community as a whole has an opportunity to prosper and grow. Because here's the thing that we don't pay attention to. If you have a community that is totally dependent on someone else to create structure, to create the way you operate, then you have no power. We struggle with why, after all this time, we are still political novices, why we don't do better when it comes to uh, navigating political waters. And the simple answer is that we don't understand numbers. We don't understand the power of coming together. Right now in Flint, I would say that you have a mayor that most people aren't that fond of. And they just took office again for the second time. And people, rather than planning, rather than developing a strategy, rather than understanding what's necessary for the improvement and betterment of their community, are standing around waiting for something to happen. Waiting is what you do when you are engulfed by the mindset of coping. It means you don't have to take responsibility. You don't have to own what happens. You can always put the blame somewhere else, you know. And we as a people do that very well. We turn our problems over to the clergy, and we hope that the clergy is going to do more than eat pork chops on Sunday, that they're going to be the leaders of our community, and oftentimes we're wrong about that. And this is not a condemnation. This is a realization that if we want something different, we have to behave differently. We have to embrace a whole different mindset. You know, one of the things that we're going to do going forward is create the opportunity for you to be live in the studio with us and also to call in, because your interaction is what's going to make this show a real learning experience. The reason I'm doing this show is that I'm tired. I'm bone weary of not seeing us gain the traction that everybody else in this country does. You know, I think back to the fact that, you know, we since 1968 have been going backwards rather than forward. I think back to the fact that when Martin Luther King gave his last speech on April the 3rd of 1968, he said very profoundly that he might not get there with us. And that was because Martin had realized something. He had realized that he had gone as far as he possibly could with coping, that he had to change, that he had to attack the problem in a different way. And that people, once they recognized that he was changing, once they recognized that he was moving in a different direction, were not going to be okay with it. They were going to do everything in their power to tear him down. And that if he did not have the support, the engagement of his own community, he could not survive. So since 1968, you know, we've seen a unending attack on voter rights. We've seen an unending attack on civil rights. And we do the same thing every time we get to that pressure point where you got to let the steam out of the what do you call it, the pressure cooker. We get together, we make some signs, and we march. And the oppressors understand that behavior because they've seen it time and time and time again, so that now they recognize that it has a time cycle to it, and that once, you know, we have done a little marching, and once we've done a little megaphoning and standing on someone else's steps, we will go back to the way things used to be. Well, we got to stop going back to the way things used to be, because the way things used to be isn't good for us. You know, you look at our city, you look at our cities like Detroit, and you look at cities like Flint, and you look at the Benton Harbors, and you drive through, and they are veritable food deserts. They don't have major shopping centers for food, you know. So you have communities that are rift with physical ailments like diabetes, like overweight, an inability to move. We got to change that. As you know, in the city of Detroit, they've put together a food cooperative that they expect to open soon. When I say soon, I mean in the next 12 to 18 months. They're building it from the ground. But the key difference will be is that it will be owned by the people. The people will be who determine its path, you know. And the only way that that happens is that we stop coping, we stop becoming rigid individualists, and we recognize that our strength is in uniting, that the only power you gain is from being able to muster people of a like mind and a like thought process to get things done. Um, if the city of Flint really wants a different kind of leadership come the next election, they need to be working on it now. They need to be identifying who, what, when, where, and how they're going to make it happen. Because if they don't, the powers that be will continue to feed you the same kind of slop that they're feeding you right now, because they know you can't do anything about it, because they know you won't unite. They know you will not fight back. You will continue to cope. And as long as you cope, they can do anything that they want to when they feel like it. You are the determiner of how things turn out. I was talking to a young man the other night who was extremely, extremely frustrated and frankly scared, because he found himself in a situation that he didn't know how he was going to handle. As you know, the Fed has increased interest rates 9 times since the beginning of 2022. Now, those 9 times have been increases that were less than 1%. But if you add them together, they add up to a lot. And how this impacted him is that 2 years ago, he bought a house. He bought that house on a variable rate interest. So what he's seen happen to him is that his interest rate has increased to the point where his loan servicing costs are twice what they were when he took out the mortgage. Now, most people can't absorb that kind of hit. So effectively, what you have happening is someone who wanted to be a homeowner being forced out and being forced to live in someone else's property for X amount of dollars every month with no real wealth accumulation being established for them or for their families. And see, in America, your home, for most people, represents the biggest portion of your individual wealth. So if you don't have a home, if you can't afford to purchase a home, you're literally up the creek without a paddle, going nowhere fast. So we spend a lot of time talking about the wealth gap between white folks and black folks. And a large portion of that wealth gap is made up of the difference between black folks owning their homes and white folks owning their homes. We have got to recognize that home ownership is a gateway to building community, that without it, we are in a place where we can't begin to move groups of people forward at the rate we would like to see it happening. I think that we're in a different place now, such that we can do something that we've never been able to do for a very, very long time. You know, we as a people are creatures of habit, and we develop relationships, and then we stick with them, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent for us. We've had a relationship with the Democratic Party since FDR. And before you think about it or say anything, let me explain. I'm not telling anybody to go out and look at the Republican Party, because there's nothing there for us. But if we're going to be a part of the Democratic political machine, then we should also see some benefit from that. You know, we now have a state that has a Democratic governor, has a Democratic House, and has a Democratic Senate. I'm not content to wait for them to do the right thing. See, a proactive governor, a proactive Senate, a proactive House would be at work right now doing everything it could to overturn right to work in Michigan. They'd be doing everything that they could to roll back the income taxes that retirees are forced to pay. They would recognize that people, particularly in our community, are penalized by those things. They're forced to struggle even more than they do under normal circumstances. I remember Flint. I remember Flint before the water crisis, and I remember Flint after the water crisis. I remember the fact that in 2018, Governor Whitmer said that were she elected, she would do everything in her power to fix Flint. Well, that hadn't happened. And the mayor has not demanded that it happen. So, like I tell you every single day, you got to think. You've got to pay attention. And you got to be walking around with your eyes wide open. Doesn't do you a bit of good to fall in line with the party rhetoric if you get nothing from it. And it's time for us to get something from it. You know, you got folks who posture and deliver nothing. You know, I would tell you that the person who leads the Michigan Democratic Black Caucus, for the most part, is worthless. I mean, you've got a state that has 83 precincts in it. And of those 83 counties and precincts, what organization has the Michigan Democratic Black Caucus done to tie them together to make sure that they form the kind of network that you saw, that you heard about in the intro to today's show? You know, it's all well and good to want to be the leader. But if you aren't leading, if you aren't taking the opportunity to move people forward in a positive direction, then you have no value. You don't deserve to be a leader. The Democratic Party of Michigan doesn't deserve your loyalty. You know, it's got to be a situation where there's benefit for everyone, and right now that benefit doesn't exist. So you got to do something different than you're doing now. You know, we pay some of the highest insurance rates for cars in the country. And for years, you heard people say that it was a result of our no-fault insurance laws and the fact that we had higher vehicle theft rates. That's just not true. What is true is that the insurance companies have found a way to leverage the people in our legislative body and Senate to do their business, to be the ones who implement their plan. They're not implementing a plan for you. Think about this. Just think about it. And ask yourself, why do people go into politics? And I submit to you that they do it for one of two reasons. They do it because they care about the people in their community and they want to serve them. Or they do it because they care about what's in their pocket and how they're going to change things for the better for themselves. Now, you don't have to believe me. All you got to do is look around. You know, you have a mayor and you have the mayor's wife, and they're both serving in political office now. And ask yourself, how has that benefited the Flint community? What has Flint got from it? We know what they got from it. They got 2 significantly higher paying jobs than they ever had before in their lives. But what have the people gotten from it? You know, how is it advancing the will of the people? How is it moving you from being a coper to a doer, to someone who has the opportunity to do things differently? We talk about it taking a village to raise a child. Where's our village at? Who is that village? Now, there are going to be people that are sitting out there and they're going to say, well, you know, that the village is the church. The church is doing it. And you know, I don't want to be disrespectful. I don't want to be critical. But what I see the church is doing is holding a service every Sunday, collecting a tithe, but not owning the responsibility of moving the community forward. And frankly, that's got to change. It's got to stop. It's got to get better. You know, recently we saw the Republican Party in Michigan elect Christina Carmano as the leader of the Republican Party in Michigan. And I'm sure that some people laughed and they said, well, you know, that's okay. There's no impact for us. And that's what you do when you cope. You laugh. You take things that are serious and you make them unserious because that's your way of dealing with them. But here's a woman who has forgotten who and what she is and has become public enemy for your community. And if she ran for office once, she's going to do it again. And the difference is that when she runs in 2026, the office that she's running for will be term limited, meaning that Jocelyn Benson can't run again, meaning that Dana Nessel can't run again, meaning that the governor can't run again. So it'll be a different group of folks that the Republicans are going up against. And without a plan, without a strategy, without a mechanism for making sure that we control, that we exercise the power available to us, we will once again find ourselves on the losing end of the stick. This doesn't have to happen. But again, coping is something we do because it's easy. It doesn't require any energy. It doesn't require any work. You just throw up your hands and say, it's the way it is. It's the way it is because that's the way you allow it to be. Stop coping. Get angry. Do something. Do something to make your community better. Be a part of the solution rather than part of the problem. You know, this effort to put together a 810 podcast is a phenomenal effort. What are you doing to support it? What are you doing to make sure that it succeeds? If you want to have a vehicle for receiving information and the news that is representative of you, what are you willing to do to make sure that this project succeeds? You know, whether it's about volunteering, whether it's about putting some coins together, whether it's about sharing the information, you gotta be doing something. You gotta be willing to shake the cage, to do the work that will make the advancement of Flint happen. You know, I read the other day that there had been another drop in Flint's population. And those drops in population shouldn't be happening now. In fact, you should be seeing population increase because you know, Michigan is going to be the next opportunity zone in Michigan. It's going to be the place where people want to live, where people want to work, where people want to have their homes, because Michigan is where the water is, and water is life. Water is life. You know, no city, no Flint, no Benton Harbor should be experiencing water problems with the water resources that we have. So we've got to become connected enough so that we can make change that is critical to the future of this state happen. Hey, Jamie? Jamie, are you there?
Did he ask me?
Yeah, I'm right here.
There's something going on. I need to pull away for about 30 seconds. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh.